Continental Airlines flight that landed safely in Newark today. The captain actually died somewhere over the Atlantic as it flew from Belgium to the U.S. The crew on the flight included an additional relief pilot who stepped in and took the place of the pilot who passed away. And here's a picture of the pilot. He's identified as 60-year-old Craig Linnell. As we said, the plane landed safely at Newark with 2 first officers at the controls. On our website, NBCLA.com, AED writes, it sounds like the first responders on board did exactly as they were trained and everything they could. In fact, they did call for a doctor and there was a cardiologist there, but certainly the flight attendants and all helped out. Another user points out this could have happened to anyone, anywhere. Driving on a highway, in my opinion, is much more dangerous. No co-pilot to take the controls there. And Edward writes, sorry for the loss of the pilot, but doesn't the FAA have strict rules that a pilot is to retire when 60 years old, or has the agency changed its policy due to the low quantity and qualifications of the pilots piloting the big jets? Well, the answer to that is, in fact, they did change mandatory retirement from 60 to 65 about a year ago. You may have noticed with me right now Captain Rusty Amir. He is a retired 767 captain. He also has experience with the 777s. We'll get to the mandatory retirement age in just a minute, but let's start with saying that a lot of people were talking about the first officers today. Those are not understudies who simply step in and take over when the captain is incapacitated, correct?
Absolutely. Those fellows are fully rated captains. They're type-rated pilots. They have all the experience required to fly the aircraft basically solo. However, they just don't have the seniority to take over as a captain.
And in fact, don't a lot of the airlines, the captains and the first officers trade the landings and the takeoffs, so it's really 50-50 up there in the cockpit?
That's correct, Colleen. We do split the legs, basically, as you indicated, and sometimes even the younger ones get more of the share.
Also, I was talking with some people in the newsroom today, and they were surprised to know that some of the flight officers actually have more time and more experience than some of the captains, but they prefer to have seniority over that.
There are instances, that is correct, that some senior first officer on a 747-400 actually has more time than the captain itself. And as far as being proficient and a great pilot, in fact, I remember an old first officer of mine that you may know very well.
Okay, I'll divulge. My husband is a first officer on an Airbus for the same airline. But let's talk about passenger safety. Were the passengers in danger at any time?
Not at all. In fact, this was, I would actually call it a non-event. From what I understand, they didn't even make an announcement telling the passengers that what happened. They just didn't want to alarm the passengers because there were 2 fully qualified pilots on board that flight. Is
that typical that you would have a backup officer, a first officer, or a captain on a flight that's a transatlantic like that?
If the flight is scheduled more than 8 hours, they have to have a relief pilot. Because, as you know, a 2-man crew cannot fly more than 8 hours according to the FARs. Okay.
What about defibrillators? Is it normal to find one on pretty much every airplane now?
Now they are, especially on transatlantic flights, on long-haul flights. They do have defibs, and they use them often. And certainly I don't know if they did in this case or not. From what I understand, once they called the doctor that was on board, it was basically too late for this gentleman.
Yes, and the doctor, in fact, was a cardiologist.
That is correct.
Who at this point in time says he presumes or he believes it may have been cardiac arrest. All right, let's talk about that mandatory retirement age. Up until about a year ago, it was 60 years old. The FAA rejiggered that. What's the word I'm looking for?
Changed
it, yes. Yeah. A simple word. Changed it to what now?
To 65.
And any idea why that is? Or?
It was a lot of, this has been going on for years, as you know. It was a arbitrary age that was picked years ago. And as you know, nowadays, 60 is the old 45, with the exception here. Most of the guys are well in better shape than they were in the old days. So it was time to change
And certainly
it.
we saw experience with Captain Sullenberger with the Airbus on
Absolutely.
the Hudson. And doesn't a captain have to have a physical, a Class 1 physical, every 6 months to a year?
That is correct. A first-class physical is required for
And those are pretty
pilot in
strenuous,
command.
right?
They are very stringent, yes.
And what we heard from this pilot's wife was that, in fact, he had had his physicals and he had no history of heart disease. It
That
could really
quite
happen
be
to
possible.
anyone.
Yeah, it could happen to anybody.
All right.
Fortunately, in this case, they had backups. In your car, as you mentioned, you don't have that luxury.
Well, thank you so much for driving in from Orange County. We know that your son graduated from high school today, so thank you for being on call.
Thank you,
Rusty,
Colin.
take care.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.